Well, welcome to the first in what we hope to be a series of discussions on the theme of tipping point. This one is on the economic impact of an epidemic, a new approach to doing business. I'm very happy to have Professor Edward Chen sitting next to me. I'm going to do a quick introduction of all the people who are going to participate in this session first, and then I'm going to hand over to Professor Chen to talk about the economic outlook for 2020. Let's start with Professor Chen. He's chairman of the Hong Kong University School of Professional and Continuing Education. We've just had a quick chat about that. He's been telling me 100,000 students, more or less, studying there. That is quite some size for a university. I can tell you, I've been teaching for many years now. Professor Chen has many titles, and I don't have time to read them all off, but I think the most important for this particular discussion is that you are the chairman of the Advisory Council of the Hong Kong Institute of Monetary Research, as I said, as well as many other things that give you the authority to speak on this subject. We also have later, so I think in about 20 minutes or so, we're going to bring in a roundtable discussion starting with Norma Chu. Norma Chu is the founder and CEO of Day Day Cook, something that she started back in 2012 when she turned her passion for cooking into a business. Now, Day Day Cook is now the largest cooking and lifestyle content platform with over 80 million active viewers and has also 6 brick and mortar experience centers nationwide. Now, we're going to learn from her a lot about what she's been doing in terms of innovating around taking some of the resources in the brick and mortar and putting it onto the online. We've also got Tony Chung, who's the Chief Executive Officer of DYX Net Group, which is the official reseller of Zoom in Hong Kong. It has many other things, but I think Zoom is something that we are talking to you now on, and something that many of us didn't know much about just a few months ago, but has now become a word that everyone is talking about and using in their day-to-day vocabulary. The company launched back in 1999, the DYNX group. It specializes in providing enterprise network solutions, including MPLS and SD-WAN internet access and data center services. And as I said, it's also become Zoom's official reseller. And then finally, but not least, we have Mr. Joe Nai, who's a senior partner and managing partner at McKinsey Greater China. Joe also sits on the Council of Advisors on Innovation and Strategic Development for the Hong Kong Chief Executive. He's also a board member of the Hong Kong Science Park. Right, I'm going to hand over to you, Professor Chen. We're going to start with about a 10-15 minute talk from Professor Chen, and then we're going to move over to a Q&A session. So please feel free to send us your questions over the Zoom platform that you're watching on right now. And then we'll go into the round table. I can assume when I ask, we're talking about the economic impact of an epidemic and the outlook, and I think we can start with presuming that the outlook is not too good. Is that right?
It's actually not too difficult to make a prediction, because definitively we are going to face a recession. The first question I try to answer is whether we're going to face just a recession or going to be a depression. For us, since the Industrial Revolution, we have something like 33 recessions, but only 1 depression in the 1930s. I believe this time it will be a recession. So that is something we can be, a bit, at ease. Of course, the difference between a recession and a depression is how long and how deep the slowing down of the global economy is going to be. For depression, it affects all sectors. In the real sector, production, trade, you have bank runs, you have the stock market crash. It could last for years. So last time it lasted for about 4 to 5 years. A recession is more short-lived. Past experience is about say 6 to 8 quarters. The last recession we had, we call it the Great Recession during the global financial crisis, lasted for about 6 quarters. Now this time, I expect the recession we're going to face in this pandemic would be about 8 to 10 quarters. I would expect a recovery in about the second quarter of 2022. But my assumption is some kind of vaccine will be developed or put in place by the second quarter of 2021. If that is the case, usually a recession will be able to take a V-shaped recovery. So then the economy will be back to the original level, maybe by the second or third quarter of 2022. And I think this time, another thing we can set our heart at ease is I don't think the financial sector will be affected. For the depression in the 30s, for the last great recession, financial sector was the triggering point. But this time, the real sector, production and trade, of course, came to a deep fall. But with the quantitative easing policy now in the United States, we now call it's unlimited buying of securities in the market. They call it now quantitative easing infinity. So anything they will buy unlimitedly, and you can see the intervention by the Federal Reserve was quite successful. I think now the bond market, the stock market are basically stabilized. So we don't have to be too much scared about the financial breakdown of the economy. The second question is, if this is going to be a recession, I will call it the grand recession. Last time it was coined the Great Recession. Why is it a grand recession? It's not in terms of the actual figures of downfall in output, trade, etc. Nobody could estimate how much the world economy is going to go down. It depends on how much and how quickly we can put the virus under control. It's almost impossible to predict. For the time being, guesstimates would run something like in 2020, world trade will drop by 30%, world GDP will drop by 10%, US possibly drop by 15%, unemployment going up to 16%. Maybe a little bit better in Asia, especially in Southeast Asia and in South Asia. China should have a 0 to 1% growth, making the whole global economy with a fall of GDP by 10% or so. But all these figures are not really relevant. Anyway, there will be a severe recession facing us. I call it a grand recession because the significance of this recession is not just in terms of how much jobs we are going to lose, what production we are going to drop, etc. But more importantly, I think the pandemic, the recession we are going to face will be a historical turning point in terms of geoeconomics. The whole geoeconomic game will somewhat be different after the pandemic. Now then, what kind of geoeconomics I'm going to foresee? We talk about globalization, then deglobalization. Deglobalization actually started sometime before. Now we face the pandemic. Started with Brexit, started with American First policy, etc. So everybody was, foreseeing a deglobalization. And would this deglobalization be sped up, by the pandemic? Because now we all understand the global supply chain is breaking down, not only at the national level, but at the international level. Supply chain is very important for the global economy. It is estimated that about 75% of world trade is related to supply chain, and China accounting for half of it. So with all these disturbances and disruption, there must be a rearrangement of the global supply chain. Now, this will lead to different division of labor. Some industries may be brought home. Some countries will try to diversify their sources of supply. You will see a new scenario of geoeconomics after the pandemic. But I'm not so pessimistic. I won't call it deglobalization. I will call it re-globalization. It will be globalization after the pandemic in different form, maybe when compared to before, or maybe to a different extent. Now, I have maybe 4 observations about the new re-globalization. We have always been paying attention to the international flow of capital, goods and services, and to some extent, human capital. But in future, in terms of human capital, countries will be particularly, paying attention to. And most likely they won't just pay attention, to talents, but health will be an important factor in human capital flow in future. Secondly, with the EU, European Union experience this time, you will see, if the borders are really all open, for economic integration like EU, with a single monetary union, with a capital market free for the people, you create problems. And the border could not be shut. And while mutual assistance may not become in time, like in the case of Italy. So I think in future countries will be thinking of a lower level, a less rigid kind of international cooperation and globalization. And thirdly, with regard to growth, I think WHO won't be disestablished, but I'm sure WHO would be supplemented by regional health organizations. So it's working hand in hand, regions and globally. And lastly, the whole economic integration and globalization will be much more based on contactless kind of economy. So there will be a lot of new opportunities for e-business, for e-finance, for e-education, for e-health, etc. So a lot of new opportunities. And for new technology, for imaginative minds. So I trust in the next section, our distinguished panels will provide us insights into what future activities and technology we will have a lot of opportunities in.
Well, I think certainly the people we have on our panel have got some great experiences to tell and things that they've managed to work out. So we'll be looking at some positive innovations that have come out of this. I have some questions that are coming in that I want to start with before we move on to the panel. I think, just from my own point of view, from the team that I've been working with here in the China Daily offices, that we've had to really adapt and change the way that we work. And I think we've learned a lot. And the last point that you make, I think, is one of the sort of crucial ones as far as I can see. And I'm hearing these stories from many other people who have been in a way of doing business and had to change, but also it's given them an opportunity to explore some different avenues, particularly using the online services, as you said. Let me get to these questions. The first one here: affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, Hong Kong's unemployment rate in the first quarter rose to 9-year high at 4.2%. This year's economy is forecasted to continue to shrink. So in your opinion, they're asking, what are the top priorities in reviving the economy?
To restart an economy, of course, you have to restart companies at the micro level. Restarting, don't wait, I think the important thing. It's very extremely difficult to predict what the rising industries will be. But from what we know about, in the case of Hong Kong, you will see there will be a revival of the consumer, because they have been suppressed consumer in the sense power. So how to provide service, goods to the consumers. But important thing is for company to get well prepared. Don't wait until you restart the business. You have to think about what you will be able to do, once you can restart. So I would say the way we work now would become a kind of new normal. It will be mobile, it will be contactless to a large extent. So my advice is don't wait. You have to start thinking how to restart.
Okay, I'm going to just place my microphone here. Apparently there is some problems with the microphones here. So if I put that in the middle, hopefully it's going to pick us both up. Is that working better? Yeah, okay. Second question that's just come in. Now the pandemic is basically under control in China, while it continues to rage in overseas areas. What opportunities can Hong Kong secure amid the recovery of the Chinese economy? What challenges will it face amid the possible global recession?
The challenge we face is, because its most important trading partner, Hong Kong has been playing, will be between the United States and Hong Kong, United States and China. So the wild card is now how quickly the United States will be able to keep, the virus, the pandemic, under control. So that's extremely difficult to predict. But for Hong Kong, the important point is to look at, stay away from, say, service. Besides service, what can Hong Kong do? For a longer term, I think Hong Kong should now start thinking of what we call industry, 4.0. With the modern days technology, with all this new demand, I think Hong Kong can use the time, as I said, to prepare for a new kind of industrial revolution in Hong Kong, because you can't just depend on tourism, you can't depend on service all the time. Hong Kong actually has, in this modern world, a capability of going into what we call Industry 4.0.
Thank you very much. Now, I know you have another conference that you have to get to, but you're going to be joining us, I believe, later for the Q&A. I want to thank you and move over to the panel, if that's okay. So let me just put this back on if I can. It's not clipping on. So we're going to start, oops, got it, there we go. We're going to start with Norma Chu, who's going to talk to us. Well, maybe we can just have like 5 minutes each for some introductory comments from our three panelists. Okay, so we're going to go to a holding slide first, and then we're going to come back to the panel. And then as soon as we come back, it will just be a couple of minutes, we'll go to Norma Chu, who's going to talk about her experiences with her cooking company.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me here today. Just a quick introduction of what we do. So Daily Cook is a content-driven lifestyle brand for young food lovers in Hong Kong. We were founded in 2012 out of Hong Kong and expanded into the mainland in 2015. So we provide three types of services to our fans and customers, including ready-to-eat. Hi, Joe. Joe's back. Ready-to-eat, food solutions. We also provide creative short-form video content and also offline experiences. So we employ about 200 staff in total, and servicing about roughly 80 million viewers nationwide. Just a little bit of sharing in terms of what we've been doing, coping with COVID in the past few months. So I think like COVID hits our company just like everybody else's. Our operation in China came to a complete halt basically in February. And everybody stayed home, and our management team held emergency weekly meetings to kind of sync up, on latest developments, keep up to speed in terms of, government policy changes, and also how and when we should bring the team back online, so to speak. I think as things were on a complete standstill in February on an operational level, the demand for our content actually was extremely high during that period. So we saw our traffic for our cooking videos really went, basically 200 to 300% growth in February and March. So I think the challenge for our team at the time was, how we can, as quickly as possible, to bring everybody back to work safely, in order to kind of capture the increase in demand, right? So I decided to come back to the mainland on 1st of March. I was in Hong Kong previously. And then on a weekly basis, we basically divided the team into batches. So those who would most effectively work together in the physical locations, such as like HR, administrative staff, and the production team, came back to the office first. And then it was the e-commerce team, and then subsequently it was like the advertising and the offline retail team. But I think it took us a probably good 3 weeks time to kind of get everything back to 70%, 80% capacity. And by the 3rd week of March, we were basically up and running at the same level before COVID-19. And then our February numbers actually went back to December level. So it took a lot of efforts to kind of, come back or recover as quickly as possible. And then I think now that we're already in the end of April and looking ahead into the 2nd quarter, we do see some opportunities in our sector, which is, I think now we're categorized. Before, we've always been categorized in the content industry. Now we're more like the stay-at-home economy, or what I would like to call is actually the kitchen economy, because everybody tends to stay home and cook a lot now. So there are 2 things we're doing, but overall, I think we are still, cautiously optimistic. We are launching a series of like exclusive ready-to-eat products to surface the rising demand for simple and delicious homemade meals. Secondly, we are also stepping up our efforts in terms of creating more live streaming content to kind of capture the viewers, keep them engaged as everybody's spending more time at home. I think one thing I do want to kind of share is that we do see there's some talent hunt opportunities out there in this environment. So, as we continue to kind of manage growth, we do see some opportunities in terms of searching for very high quality candidates at a much more reasonable cost during the recent weeks.
Okay, thank you, Norma. We have got some questions that come in. I'll go straight to those.
Okay.
To you first before we move on to our next panelists. The first is, amid the pandemic, many people form the habit of cooking at home, myself included, as did a lot of my friends. Day Cook grasped the opportunities and achieved a boom in both clicks and sales. How do you plan to retain this momentum in the post-pandemic era?
Yeah,
Possible?
well, I do think like the spike was really, really sharp in March. I mean, March over February and then February over January, it was very, very significant. But I do think that it has changed consumer behavior on a long-term basis. So I do think that there is a lot of positive impact for our industry going forward. And for us to capture that opportunity, I think number one, we have to stay in front of consumers, understand what they need, and kind of, provide services that cater to their needs. So for example, as I mentioned earlier, continue to create captive live stream and pre-recorded content to keep our viewers engaged. And number two, I think for people that are staying at home, even though they are cooking more, probably not everybody are, they don't want to do everything from scratch. So we are, launching a lot of different solutions that can help you cook at home much more easily.
And then a second question, which I think is probably, it's one that certainly speaks to a lot of our audience. I mean, we're talking to people on this panel who've had quite a positive experience in terms of the way that their business have been able to adapt. But for those who haven't, for those facing strong winds, most local startups encountered unprecedented challenges, and some have been forced to lay off and shut down. But do you have any suggestions for them to get through the tough times? What would be your message of hope to them going forward?
I think I want to maybe can I go first? I'll go first. And then...
Well, this is actually to you, Norma, and I'm going to bring similar questions, but I want to we'll do this as the last question, and then we'll move on to Tony.
Okay, sure. So like, I think I will share the online business for us is actually somewhat benefiting from the current situation, but I think the offline business actually has been hit very, very hard. So for the stores, complete shutdown in February. We have a store in Wuhan, which is still closed right now. So I think the retail business is a brick and mortar business, which is actually still having a very tough time. But what we've done, number one, I think we have to be very cost effective. So we did have to trim some staff and the retail business level. But I think at the same time, sometimes people are more creative during crisis time. So I think during, our team has been very creative during this period, because our stores, basically we offer offline cooking classes, but because everything was shut down, but we still have to come up with an idea to service our existing customer base. The team actually started launching live streaming and pre-recorded cooking classes in March that were being sold. And some of them are free experience classes, and some of them are sold to our new customers. So I think, it is tough. It's definitely tough for all of us. And sometimes I think we have to remain very cautious, be cost sensitive, but at the same time, I think don't limit ourselves. And all of us have to be very creative during this period.
Okay, I'm going to move over to Tony now. I'd like to talk, I'd like you to start with just giving us a sort of 5-minute introduction. I think the success of Zoom has been very well documented. A lot of people have talked about this, but we presume also that you've also been trying to provide solutions to a lot of companies and educational establishments, etc., who are struggling to try to get through this particular situation. I'm wondering if you can give us some insights from that, as well as the success or the challenges, should I say, that you've also faced within your own company.
Oh yeah, sure. Definitely. Just want to echo a little bit to Norma. I also enjoy cooking, so probably I cook. I might cook even better than my wife. So yeah, it changes a lot. So because we spend some time at home, so we do a lot more cooking. Even I do it by myself. So from my perspective, we are more coming from a service provider perspective. So we do serve about a few thousand corporate customers on one hand, and on the other hand, of course, we have about 400 something people working in an organization. We spread around in 9 locations in Greater China, so Hong Kong, Taiwan, China. So when the pandemic actually happens, we are also facing the kind of like a bit quick challenge on how we can actually work close together as a team to move the business forward. And at the same time, we also have to look after our customers as well. So if I take a look at how we actually mobilize our stuff and work on it quickly to deal with the situation, basically I would classify it more like, so in order to move quick, we have to face at least some challenges there. So the first type of challenge is more like people. So how we can actually group people because we can't meet them physically face to face. And there are some works that involve like high interactive discussion, things like that. How can we actually do something quick to quickly bridge that gap? That's one thing. Secondly, of course, we do have system, we do have applications in the office. And I think every business, they do have some sort of like business process and data that they have to run and they have to manage. So basically, it comes to more like people and also the tools. And also, in order to bridge them together, we need the accessibility. So in DYX, we do offer different sets of solutions, and we use it on our own as well. Say, for example, in terms of connectivity, once when the outbreaks actually happen, when we notice that customer cannot really and the staff cannot actually get physically together, we do offer like remote access solution for them so that they can work at home and using the remote access tools to log on back to their VPN or log on to their system in order to get access to their applications and data. I think that's the most important things, because when you need to work, basically you need to get access to those applications and also the data. That's the first thing. Second thing I think is most important is that once we have the data ready, we have the tools ready, we need to interact and we have to collaborate. And that's the reason why we quickly react and take up Zoom as more like a collaborative tools and launch it and then let our customer to use it, because that can allow staff to do basically a non-face-to-face type of interactions. They do using Zoom to do training, discussion, meetings, And of course, we do see a lot of education customers take up Zoom right now doing online training. So that's something that we do believe, apart from tools, and accessibility, collaborative application is something very important that we have to take care of as well. And then, of course, when we come back to the people side, I think it's more like the trust that we have to believe we need each company or need each business to really pay attention to, because you're working from home, you're working at remote, so probably you're using tools that you might not be familiar with, and then you have to get used to a different working environment. So the kind of trust and also your devotion and commit to use the tools and then work well with your colleagues and make the best use of it is actually very important as well. In order to develop the trust or the kind of like interaction, we do provide some sort of like kind of best practices supporting stuff to our customers. Say, for example, we help them to put up some best practices, like in the morning, the group have to come in and then do a greet, and then do a quick debrief, and then towards the end of each day, each subgroup has to do an online report or something like that. We have to guide our customers and let them try to make use of the tools to still simulate the kind of environment that they are actually working more like in the office, in order to make them to be productive. So that actually sum up my quick overview on that. And then, yeah, I'm open to question and see whether you have any question or anything that you want me to supplement and add. Yeah.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I'm interested in is what is going to happen for a company like yours after this has gone away. We see, I mean, I've seen through my children who've been learning online using Zoom. My daughter did 3 Zooms this morning, I think, as part of her learning for education. But what happens when they go back to school? Is this something that's just going to sort of go away? Or do you think that the lessons that people are learning through this new type of innovation and new types of learning are things that they're going to stay with and bring forward? And also, you know, the teachers, not just the teachers, but of course, everyone in business who've been using these tools, there has been some sort of time it's taken for them to learn these skills, but they now have them, and quite impressed, in fact, with the skills that the teachers have, and I'm sure a lot of people in business as well have developed using this technology to do all sorts of things. Where do you see it going from here, or should I say post-pandemic? Is this just going to be something that's there and then everyone's going to lose the skills, or do you think that they're going to be integrating them far more into their day-to-day routines and the way that they do business and teach and all sorts of other things?
Yeah, it's a very good question. With that, I'll try to compare a little bit based on my experience, because back to 2003, you know, we faced the SARS issue as well. And then at that time, I was actually the GM for WebEx. And I believe I'm actually the first group of people trying to promoting the collaboration tools on the ground and try to push people to work more online and meet more online and do training online. And when compared to the pandemic this time, I think the nature is a little bit different, because the whole thing lasts for much longer. That's number one thing. And then the geo in terms of the spread, in terms of the impact, is much wider as well. So it's very interesting. I do believe human behavior is more like this. When you try to do something on 1 or 2 times, you may not actually change it as more like a habit. But when you do it for over a month or 2 months, or keep doing it on and on and on, you try to also work on it and try to build up stuff to make use of, really making use of the tools to build it up and try to use it intensively. Then you start to see the values. And then when the pandemic is over, the stuff that you have built, actually, you know that it creates values there. It's something that is not really easy for you to give it up and then just leave it over there. What I would see is more like people will try to divide their way of doing teaching. For some of the real interactive, like say, for example, really need real interactive discussion or really need some skills training or whatsoever, they may still need to go back to the classroom and do a physical, or we call a high touch model. But for those, say, for example, it's more like not so highly interactive stuff. There is definitely this doing online teaching definitely is a way out for them to help them to learn a lot more. And then definitely can, because it's online, there isn't really a time restriction over there. And we are not talking about just school. Say, for example, talking about tutorial institutes. They can actually make use of a much wider time span and do more business and make use of the tools to do more different types of teaching, leveraging the online kind of thing. And the thing about when compared to 2003, we don't have 4G, 5G, we don't have a good network, we don't have like those smartphone, smart devices. Even I still remember at that time, we want to show a video. We won't be able to show a high definition one, and we won't be able to have a good camcorder to do some good recording for training. But now we have all these available on the ground. So including the good connection, good devices, we have like a lot of content creation tools and a lot of applications that can help students and teachers to really make the class make it more fun and more interactive. So I do believe that kind of habit will develop and will go on. But the way of using it might be different from what we are seeing it right now. Yeah.
We have a question coming in about 5G, but I'm going to hold that because I think it's going to be one I'd like to ask all of you and how this is affecting us going forward. Let's move over to you, Joe. You've worked, looked at, as a consultant, looked at a lot of different companies. You've got a sort of much broader view of what's going on here. Can you give us some examples and your outlook on where you think this is going right now?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here, and congratulations to Norma for the great thing your company is doing. I have been following and watching you, and I think
thanks, Joe.
It's wonderful. And obviously, for Tony, I have to deal with Zoom every day, so I'm glad to see your company thriving during this time. Look, I'll tell you what I feel. First of all, I would love to go back to the old days, okay? I've had enough of meals at home. I've had enough of Zoom, right? I cannot to see people in real life. I cannot wait to go out to some restaurants instead of just having life at home. So, love you guys, but I really have had too much of it too. So that's my first point. I'm frustrated, and I can't wait to go back to the old life. Okay.
Yeah.
From some observations around what's going on, I think I look at what we're doing right now as a community a little bit like chemotherapy to cancer. What happens in chemotherapy? We kill the cancer cells, but we kill everything along with it. Okay. So what we're doing here is that we can kill the virus in Hong Kong, but we've killed off like many things along with it. And the collateral damage of all this is what I worry a lot about. I do think that Hong Kong has had a pretty good at this stage grip on at least what is happening around here, and China as well, I would say. But I would also say that when that happens, a lot of, and I was very scared when Professor Chen was talking about a grand recession. I really hope that it will be less than that. But I think that it's really quite drastic what we've been through in terms of, so I liken that to kind of chemotherapy. We kind of killed the virus and everything else. The second observation I would have here is, there's a little bit around, I would say, kind of weak and strong here. I think that, when we make the analogy that the virus is killing off maybe the weaker, more vulnerable side of society, right? People who are older, maybe with chronic illness and all that. I think on the company side, it's doing exactly the same thing, right? Look, Day Cook is a, online media property, right? That's why you guys are doing very well here. Tony, you are selling Zoom. I mean, what better to sell right now, right? So you're kind of in the right segments, right? So, I congratulate China Daily here of picking the right segments here, but you don't have the restaurant owner here. You don't have the company that only have 2 months of cash flow here, right? For those guys, I mean, this has been a disaster, right? So I think that the inequality in society has been exacerbated by this, just like it has been for patients, right? If you're older, more weaker, more vulnerable, you get taken out. if you are a weaker, more vulnerable, business, you get taken out. Okay, you have no access to funding, you get taken out, right? What that's going to lead to? Inequality, even more so than in the past. And I worry a lot about that because I do think that we were on the path already, something that was quite unsustainable. And I think that this virus and the aftermath of this, right, whether it's a grand recession or a little recession, will lead us more towards that way. And I think that that's where, look, I think that both politically and economically, I think it's something that we need to, deal with for quite some years to come.
Okay, let me go back then to that 5G question. I'll come back to some specific questions. I don't have any right now for you, Tony, for you, Joe, sorry. So the 5G question is really, we're seeing much faster interconnectivity. We've just launched 5G in Hong Kong, I think about a month ago, with grand plans over the next couple of years to pretty well reach everybody with it. How does that change things? We've talked about back in 2003, when in the time of SARS, that you really couldn't do very much. You had the technology, but the speed of the internet really sort of let things down. I'm kind of wondering whether this, in some ways, there may be some silver lining here. There may be some positive outputs by the fact that it is driving us to rethink the way that we do business online, and we use or we have an online alternative at the same time as we're just launching into this very fast internet backbone that we're all going to access. I know specifically in Hong Kong, this is something that's happening in my own backyard. In fact, they were digging up the path outside my house over the weekend to put a new fiber optic cable in, and the engineers who I talked to there were talking about this grand plan in Hong Kong to get everyone connected, doesn't matter where you live, to some sort of fast internet, which is very encouraging. Doesn't happen everywhere else, but is this region sort of well set up for that, and how is it going to affect? So I'll let you go, whoever wants to go first. Maybe we could actually, maybe we start with you, Joe, as you were the last one who was talking.
Yeah, look, I think that the question is going to be, how that will accelerate even more, right? Some of the trends that we're seeing. So, if you think about, and I would, think about in the last few months, right? What has really happened, right? So you think about entertainment, you think about education, if you think about corporate communication, that has been going over a lot of what the current existing technology is. I think that we're just in some ways, I liken that a little bit to, right, the phone that we have right now, but we have actually used maybe 30% of the capacity, right? I think that we have used a little bit more of that right now. Obviously, 5G brings a lot more capacity, right, in terms of what we can do with these, right? And I think that we are only in the, beginning stages of these, right? I was talking to a couple of guys who are looking at some educational applications, right, of both, just even now, right, in terms of how we're doing a lot of online education. The entire corporate education, by the way, is all moving towards this now, right? There will be no more classes in the future where a bunch of people at 7:30 p.m. on a Wednesday evening get together in one of these classrooms and do like a 12-person class. I think that's like history now, right? People have all figured out, hey, this is easier, better, much more doable. You can actually do a lot more with it. So I do think a lot of these will move, right? And I think the 5G will be an enabler, right, of a lot of much more colorful, much more capacity, right, for us to do even more video, even more instantaneous, right? Speed will be faster. So I do think that a lot of things that we're seeing right now will accelerate, right, with the capacity of what that will bring us, and also mobile, right? I mean, to be honest, I was talking to one of our clients that was doing internet hospital in China. And one of the things that a lot of people have figured out, and by the way, this virus is very, very interesting, right? One of the most impacted sector is hospital, because all the normal business is all gone. Because unless you're dying, you're not going to hospital, right? You're staying away from hospitals, right? So actually, right, the hospitals are only for the very serious, right? And then everyone else is gone. And then people are trying to figure out, how do I do that, appointment through, online means, right? And I think that is also where I would imagine, in the future, that is really going to be another whole capacity, right? Where you can do a lot more with that, including scans, including all sort of stuff, that you can actually make through that. And the internet hospitals right now in China, there are over 300 of these licenses giving out right now. They're all talking about how this will actually greatly accelerate maybe part of that build out, right? So I do think that, look, I mean, if you go sector by sector, there will be all sorts of applications, right, that will be enabled, right? And I think that this, virus maybe is a very good way, right, to maybe the silver lining. But although I do think a lot of offline things will get replaced, right, will accelerate a lot of these developments.
Yeah, well, I wish Professor Chen was still here. Maybe we can bring him in to comment on that. We did actually have a conversation before this started, and he was saying how people actually do prefer to be, or a lot of the people he's teaching do prefer to be in the classroom. But I'll see if he can come back later. Let's go over to Norma. Maybe you can comment also on this question of 5G and how this is affecting, or how you think this might affect different businesses.
Sure. I mean, okay. I think like kind of riding on what Joe was saying, is definitely an enabler in terms of, our sector. So we think that cost of content creation will definitely go down significantly. So in other words, that it will be a lot more competitive within our space because there's going to be a lot more, content creators, so to speak. But I think consumption will also be even more seamless. So, in terms of consumer experience, in terms of whether watching a content to purchasing something while they're watching a video, it's even going to be a better consumer experience. So I would expect within our sector to have more implementation of like AR and VR into content creation, that what we're not seeing right now. So like we would like to do that, but we're not doing that yet due to cost reasons or accessibility reasons. So I think with 5G, I think we can improve our overall service quality. And we would expect content and consumption become even more seamless going down the road.
Okay, great. And over to Tony. What is your assessment of 5G and how this is going to affect business?
Yeah, I would like to start talking about the characteristic of 5G. I try not to go into too technical, but two main characteristics of a 5G is that basically it supports the so-called high bandwidth stuff and also low latency. So I think a lot of the talking at the market, probably they will focus more on talk about high bandwidth. So we are talking about with 5G, you can support HD video, and the application, just like Norma mentioned about VR, AR, actually we see a lot of opportunities that can bring into the like smart construction, design industry, creativity, and also like definitely if you are doing like sports training or doing something like more like training a sportsman, using VR, AR is actually a very good application that can help them to really practicing and also learn the skills as well. But apart from the high bandwidth stuff, actually another perspective for 5G is actually it can support kind of like low latency applications to run in the space. We're talking about low latency. It doesn't mean that there is a high traffic sending over through the network, but it has to be, the delay has to be very minimal. And that can actually support a lot of real-time applications, including, I think there are a lot of people mentioning about like the car navigation. We are talking about like smart supply chain, like those IoT stuff. That actually, with the advance of 5G, it definitely can help to support this. And also, with the network being picking up, the cost will also be driving down as well. We can make use of robot and save some sort of like the cost for doing some of the process. So definitely, we do believe 5G is a good uptake for the online business when moving forward.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to come back. I'm going to come back now to Joe with a question. Sorry, I've just lost it now. A question that's come in, which I kind of want to change slightly. So they're asking you to comment on the importance of innovation for startups and large corporations. Professor Chen is coming back as well, so I might get him to comment on this also as a business educator. But do you think that business schools and startups and all of that discussion now will have a pandemic plan? Will they say, okay, if you want to start this business, this is your bricks and mortar, or this is what you do, and then what do you do when something like this comes along? We hadn't seen a pandemic for 100 years, so it wasn't really part of a planning, I guess. But do you think that this is something in terms of innovation and startups that people will put into their plans, or banks and businesses will want to see?
Look, I think for people in risk management, right, this was, again, one of these, events that happens that kind of makes you rethink around how you think about risk, how you think about, kind of management of that. But if you think about startups, I don't think that they think in that way at all. Okay, I think the startups think it this way. Okay, so right now, with the pandemic, right? What has that done, right? That has actually accelerated a lot of things that were already in motion. For example, right? People, who want to be much more flexible around kind of work hours, right? Companies that think a lot more around, oh, maybe I don't need to have very big office spaces. Maybe I can actually think about work from home as a very viable option, right? People who think about, perhaps, the fluidity, right? Between kind of work, home, and family life, and all that. Maybe that whole gig economy, right? Is So I think that what startups think about right now here, right, is basically, this has highlighted a lot of things that might change in the whole kind of business practices, right? And what you think about is actually not what if it happens again. You're thinking about what are the opportunities that this has brought about that I can now leverage upon, right? So I'm leveraging upon things that are much more online. I'm thinking about much more digital. I'm thinking about what are the things I can sell into big businesses that they don't have and they need me, right? So for example, I'll give you some examples, right? One of the startups I work with, a very big one now, right? What they do a lot is around, AI and machine learning for financial institutions to do online credit, right? So before, I can actually look at the guy who comes into the office to get a loan, right? But what if I do online only, right? What are the things that you actually need to do? Because maybe, you get much more accustomed to a world where you never see your customers, right? So again, what you think about is what opportunities that come your way, accelerated by this, right, that you capitalize on. And then even with large corporates, right, the question is going to be, was I agile enough to deal with this, right? What are the wake-up calls that I got because of this, right? And can I imagine a world where I'm not shifting my business for the pandemic, but the pandemic is alerting me, right, towards changes I need to accelerate today, right, to make sure that I'm coping with, right, the new world. That was, by the way, already halfway there, except that I never saw it coming.
Okay, and Professor Chen, what is your opinion in terms of teaching? You have a lot of business classes. You told me before one of the most popular ones was finance, where you're teaching. Do you think that this will become part of any sort of business class nowadays?
Well, in the past few months, actually all classes have to be taught online. But I would think we should divide into two groups. If your classes are largely for imparting knowledge or providing insights, it could be online. But if you're talking about leadership training, I think physical face-to-face could not be replaced. So still there would be a need for face-to-face, physically kind of education. We can't, do away with it, because it's how you train leaders, how you create talents. But another issue arising from this teaching is how could you control classes? It's difficult. We control, one discussion session, it might be easy. A conference call, maybe, it's easy. But how to control the attention and how to assess the effectiveness of teaching, I think it's difficult. But I think the pandemic this time would give us a very good opportunity, to try it out, to see how we can come very close to a physical kind of teaching. But I would say, I still believe in face-to-face physical, teaching is effective, in some cases.
Okay, I've got a question that goes out to all of you. It's about logistics that's come in. Do you think logistics is the hot industry during this COVID-19, and will it be sustained? Anybody want to pick that up? Let's go to Norma. How is your logistics during during this pandemic?
Well, okay. I would say, I'm not sure I'm the right person to comment on it because we actually outsource our logistics part of the business. But I think, because we are very heavily dependent on online e-commerce business, even though most of the entire business is, touchless, I guess, touchless economy, to have a product delivered to our consumer at the end of the day, we do need logistics network. So part of the challenges that we had to overcome in March was not only our team coming back online ourselves, but we also had to work with suppliers to make sure the manufacturing capacity was coming back online, and also logistics had to be stable. Otherwise, we were doing a lot of sales, but the products weren't able to be delivered, and then we'll end up having a lot of customers complain. So, it's definitely a very important part of our business at this point.
Okay, Joe.
Yeah, look, of course, this, logistics companies has been vital, right, during this time, right? For a lot of people, who are stuck in their homes, okay, the only people they see, right, are their family and the delivery guy, okay? So if you think about kind of what happened in this whole logistics industry, I think that has been, almost, I would say become a key pillar, right, of the stay-at-home economy. Right? Think about, all the delivery services in terms of the meals, right, that has actually been delivered, right? In fact, that has become such a big topic that some people are complaining that they're taking too much of a cut, right, of the business. But regardless, what has happened is that at the end of the day, there's still the last mile that you need to cut through for physical goods, right? And that's where I think that comes in. Look, this has been a huge growing industry. In fact, I would say that the entire Chinese e-commerce industry, right, has been successful because of logistics in China, right? And that's what the rest of the world has been trying to catch up and figure out by now, right? And I think that in Hong Kong, I think that we have had, our fair share of challenges in there, namely that it is too expensive, right? And so with scale, with better network planning, can that be, kind of lower cost, more effective, more efficient? And so therefore you can do same day, same morning, right? I think that's actually where it would then, accelerate a lot of the things that, we say that Hong Kong is kind of backwards in, maybe e-commerce and some of these other things that, we sometimes, complain about, right? I do think logistics is a very key in there. I can't tell you whether it's a growth or not, because I do think that part of it is cost, right? And cost has to come down. Otherwise, in some ways you're kind of handicapped by that.
Yeah. Well, as somebody who's I lived in the Chinese mainland for 10 years and then moved to Hong Kong after that. And that was one thing that really struck me immediately, that you don't have that same, as you said, same day delivery or the same sort of logistics. Let's maybe, Tony, do you have anything that you want to comment on this, on logistics as well? I'm not sure if that's something that is involved.
Oh yeah, actually we are more like a user. We are using logistic company quite a bit because basically like we have documents that we need to deliver every day, and we have equipments that we have to deliver to our customer side and get that installed. So basically logistics is I would say it's a very important component, especially within these days, because we can't really like meet people face to face, and we can't really send more people down on the ground. We have to rely on all these hands and feet and help us to do a lot of the work. So I think they're very important. If you take a look at even from a government policy, like you see Hong Kong government, they try to stop a lot of these cross-border stuff, but they still allow the cross-border like drivers doing all these, like especially on the daily necessity stuff. They still have to get across the border. Although of course we have to implement a lot of the health measures to make sure they won't transmit the virus and things like that. So I do believe that they are very important, and especially if we are getting more and more on business doing online, and when we are talking about this O2O on offline working together. So these guys working on the ground, they are really the pillar for supporting the online growth of the business.
Okay, thank you. We have a question specifically for Professor Chen, asking what do you think will happen to people that may be losing their job, given that unemployment is expected to rise in many countries, including this part of the world? Will it create disruption or social unrest?
Well, it depends on the safety net systems in different countries. I can understand now it seems the situation is under control. Because how to deal with this pandemic? You can have a fiscal policy, government spending more money, and you can have a monetary policy, printing more money, more quantitative easings. But it seems it's most important for this time is income maintenance. You have to maintain the income of the people, employed or not employed, because this is important. Otherwise, there's no consumer power, after the pandemic. So now the whole issue, I think, facing all governments is how to, implement this income maintenance. So I would say to deal with this, if these income maintenance programs are well put in place, I do not see any, social unrest, and that may be time for the unemployed or being temporarily unemployed to acquire new skills, to think about their future. So maybe this is a good opportunity for them to restart. But the crucial point is governments have to take income maintenance as a priority.
Okay, we're coming towards the end of our time, and I've been doing a number of discussions with the editors of the Asia News Network, which is one of the members that China Daily, 23 media organizations across. And I always finish by asking the editors that we're talking to about their sort of predictions for the future. I know it's impossible to predict when this epidemic is going to end and how bad the economic impact is going to be. But I'm wondering, just as you stand right now, what are your thoughts in terms of how long this is going to take to recover? And at the end of it, whether we're going to be in a stronger position as a result of what we've learned, particularly these online lessons and the things that we've learned through some of your companies as well. Are we going to be in a stronger position, or do you think that it's just going to be back to business as normal? Let's go around the group. Maybe I can start on my screen here. I'm not sure if you're seeing the same screen here. I've got Tony up in my left-hand corner. So let's start with Tony for your predictions for when this is going to end and whether you think we're going to be stronger for it.
If we are talking about the pandemic, so as you said, it's tough to judge on when it will come to an end. But no matter what, I think when moving forward, we have to get prepared that even if the pandemic this time comes to an end, there might be a chance that there will be something that comes up that will affect us in doing something more, like we have to keep the kind of social distance and doing business in a different way. I think the experience this time, because it lasts for a bit longer and the impact is a bit wider, actually give us a very good time to sit down and rethink and also try to revamp a little bit on how we do business. I'm talking about like even within DYX in our group ourselves. I get used to travel a lot to our different offices and meet staff and try to work with them on planning, setting up goals and doing reviews and things like that. So now we have to all do it online, and we have to do it even more efficient. And things has to come in place more precise, and we have to do things much faster and react much faster. So I do believe this kind of culture needs to be maintained. I would say, first of all, we need to develop that, and it also needs to be maintained when moving forward, because I think after getting this 2003 SARS and also this time and also upcoming, there might be another kind of events like this. We have to get ourselves prepared. And that's what I mentioned, because in terms of the infrastructure, network, technology, nowadays we are more ready. So why don't we just ride on the chance, ride on the opportunities this time to take up and really leverage the technology and try to do something that can help us to change our way on how we do business, and that can actually help us to benefit ourselves and also our customer and also our suppliers, players in the ecosystem for long term. So that's what I would suggest. It's a good time for us to really seriously look into this.
Okay, thank you. Norma?
Okay, well, I'm just gonna, state my prediction. I'm just gonna hope for a recovery in the second half of 2021. And in terms of how we're gonna, come out of this, as a hardcore entrepreneur at heart, I have to believe that we're gonna come out a bit stronger. I think we are gonna be more efficient. We're gonna be more nimble. and we're going to be more resilient as a society as a whole, right? So hopefully, you know, we can all come out of it alive and more knowledgeable, because once again, we've lived through something that, quote unquote, literally didn't kill us.
Joe.
Yeah, well, my prediction is that Norma will have a great IPO and a great business, that Tony will have a lot more Zoom customers, and there will be a lot more people that will need Professor Chan's continuing education to retool themselves. Those are the three things I'm pretty sure of. What I am unsure of, and I'm a little bit more worried about, right, is what I said before, is that coming out of pandemic, I think that people's livelihood is one, but I really do think that the problems of inequality will be worse. I think of, you know, what are we talking about here? We're talking about the digital people becoming even more stronger. We're talking about the younger, more educated, and more able to leverage these tools. Those people becoming even more powerful, more useful, right? You're talking about manual labor, people that need physical effort, right, to be more marginalized, right, in business, right? You're talking about people who have low income, right, to be the first one to get laid off and maybe to need more government help, right? And they will be the ones who are continuing to be the more vulnerable in society. So I'm very optimistic as a society. I think we'll get out of this, but you know, I do think that we need to look at a broader question around what do we do with all of this, right? And is that getting better? Is it getting worse? And how do we come around to think about how do we deal with the inequality that comes with it? And that to me is what I've realized right through this pandemic, having stuck at home for 3 months, right? I do realize that actually, this is becoming, a more unequal world. And that to me is very important. And that to me is what, Professor Chan, I'm hoping that you will help us and lead many people in Hong Kong to fix. Because unless we fix that, the riches and the prosperity of society, that will not be shared among people equally, that would cause us even more rifts among society that we're seeing already today.
And Professor Chen. Yeah.
I totally agree with all, especially with Joe. We have already been having a digital divide. Further digitization will be the next phase after the pandemic. But the haves and have-nots, the gap will even be wider as a result, because we are going to an even more advanced stage of digitization. But the first question, of course, still is when this pandemic is going to end. It depends not only on a vaccine, of course, that is a precondition, but more importantly is the whole mentality and governance of the world. Whether we can do something like what China has done, whether our mindset of dealing with pandemics has changed from complacency to a more proactive and more prepared. I think that is important.
Thank you very much. This has been an absolutely fascinating discussion. Thank you all for participating. If we had been in a conference hall, I'd be asking everyone to clap at this time, but I guess maybe you can click your clap icon or whatever you have in Zoom to show your appreciation for our panelists. Thank you very much for your time. As I said, this is the first of what we hope to be a series called Tipping Point, where we're looking at how businesses are dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. For now, this is myself. I'm DJ Clark, Professor Chen, and all of our panelists from our office in Hong Kong and from wherever you are. Thank you very much. It's been a great discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Thank you.